Pride, well, my colloquial answer would be putting everything that the world shuns right in their face and letting them know that you have a right to exist, a right to be here. In fact, I think that our mere existence is a form of rebellion, but a bit more true to how it's celebrated. Pride is really about community of folks who are living a life that is different from kind of the heteronormative world that we've been made to believe is the only way to exist. Finding community and the people who share those ideals.
What does pride mean to me? Pride is celebration. It's liberation. It is a culmination of becoming or being. There are a lot of things in society and how we are brought up that kind of negate everything that pride is. It's kind of like when they do Black History Month and it's like, oh, it's only just a month out of the year, but Black people and Black history is important for the entire year. We only put a month to it, but in reality, there are a lot of queer people who are doing great things throughout the year, and they deserve to be celebrated. So it is a moment to like celebrate a bigger movement of things that are happening throughout the year, while also acknowledging some of the hard truths that come with that liberation piece.
The first word that comes to mind for me is resistance. As I think the origin of Pride, Stonewall riots, all the folks who paved the way did it in a resistance. And though it is a liberation, I think resistance can be full of joy in such a way that it is a celebration. So first, resistance. Pride means resistance to me.
An instinctual rebellion and reclamation of freedom. Pride, in New York City being the Pride Parade coming from the bricks thrown by trans women in New York. I feel like Pride is a legacy of disruption to hegemonic cis heteronormative systems. And huge parts of that are about doing something about these systems. And a huge part of that is like just existing in spaces.
Well, first of all, let's just unpack the fact that pride needs to be more Black, period. But how I choose to celebrate pride, as well as embracing my race, is just ultimately choosing to consider those who have come before me, who have not had any type of space, because oftentimes if we think about historically how pride was celebrated, with the exception of our late great Marsha, I really believe that we need to learn about our historical figures like the James Baldwin, like the Bayard Rustins, and kind of how that comes to how do I actualize that now and how I celebrate pride is I find community, specifically, I'm privileged to be in Atlanta, Georgia, to have a lot of people who are Black and who are queer. So I find that community, hear their different experiences, and oftentimes their experiences are far different from mine. And it helps me to spread the narrative or expand the narrative of what it means to be Black and queer.
I think a lot of people try to ask this question about kind of which are you first. I've had conversations, I hate to bring up straight people, but I've had conversations with straight people and they have tried to convince me that my Blackness is first, but I see my Blackness and my queerness as inseparable. Now, there are certain spaces or certain phenotypical experiences that alert one of another, but I also try to signal other ones as well. And so I think it's also important when we talk about intersections, I think it's important to also go back to the original concept by Kimberly Crenshaw, intersectionality being the intersection of two marginalized identities that are both fighting for safety and liberation, but are prompted or coerced to use each other to gain larger power. And so is often a decision I have to make because we're talking about blackness. I'm visibly black. Also talking about colorism. Being dark skinned is important to talk about as well. But I don't see, and my queerness is very important to me. And I think there's a lot of concepts that queerness needs to be something behind closed doors. And I'm like, no, it needs to be every day, all the time. And so there definitely are environments which I kind of decide which one. I'm like, oh shit, do I want to be in like a black space or a queer space? So I often have to make that navigation, but I'm working really hard for those intersections to actually be as closely symbiotic as possible, because I cannot separate them, but it's the world out there that wants me to.
My racial identity and my queer identity intersect continuously, right? I think of Juneteenth being more celebrated these days, so I'm always celebrating it. But I just was talking today about how there is no pursuit for liberation with homophobia and transphobia and femphobia existing. Therefore, you are anti-black if you're homophobic. You're anti-black if you're transphobic, and you're anti-black if you're femphobic. So they intersect for me in a way, the same way that sweet potatoes and mac and cheese intersect and make a brilliant concoction. The same way that gin and ginger ale intersect and make a brilliant concoction. Two recipes that go together just the right way. It makes me feel proudful. It makes me feel strong. And it makes me feel able, especially when I'm low or especially when I feel isolated, because I have two communities that I know are supporting me and a mixture of those communities that are doing the damn thing when the world is against them.
The queer ancestor that I would like to acknowledge during Pride is, I have two faves, so this is gonna be really hard. But Bayard Rustin. A lot of times, Black people in the community like to put everything on the back of Martin Luther King and don't even realize or do their own research to know that Bayard Rustin, an openly gay male, Black male at that, was the mastermind behind the civil rights movement. So the organizing, the planning, we're meeting here, we're gonna do this is what you need to do, this is what you need to say, this is what you need to, like, orchestrated that whole entire thing. And so when we think about like history, he is a part of history. And we're only now finding out about him in videos or like publications that are coming out, like The Unsung Hero, when he was literally like the mastermind behind it. And if we didn't have him, like, where would we have ended up? Would the movement have been as effective as it was? Or would it have just been like everybody rah, 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 but there's actually no follow through from that?
Ooh. How has my relationship with Pride changed over the years? When I was younger, being that I am a church boy, come from a Baptist background, being gay was shunned. It meant that you were an abomination. And largely the Pride March was all connected to nudity, public sex, indecency. Over the years and after educating myself, I've recognized that Pride, again, is a form of rebellion. And to me, it is I would say like a challenge to ultimately learn more about queer people, historical figures that have come before, and to find spaces where, again, you can expand your idea of what it means to be queer. And again, this is coming from somebody who used to be very homophobic, if I just be honest. Someone who felt like, because of what I was exposed to, there was only one way to live, one way to exist. You must have a wife by the age of, I would say, 25, and children before the age of 30, and live and have your parents move into your home and live life happily ever after. Pride, I think, because I've met people from all different backgrounds, queer people from all different backgrounds, it's encouraged me to figure out my own definition of what life is supposed to look like, beyond our heteronormative ways of being. So, yeah.
All right, so I wasn't always out, and I wasn't always the 7 you see here today. My relationship with pride has definitely changed. I used to watch it with envy. I used to watch the whimsical nature of it. I used to watch the flamboyant joy of it and want to be part of that party. I was outside the club wondering how I can get in, basically. And I remember always watching it and wanting to be there with my queer siblings, but I couldn't get past my own internalized homophobia, my own internalized, I want to say, closetness. When I finally did come out, I remember going to my first Pride and my friends with me and feeling like I was a bird in the sky, feeling as if I was finally who I was supposed to be. I talked about this earlier, y'all, but I remember being in New York around Pride season and seeing a black gay man in hand with another black gay man and thinking, oh, that's possible, right? So being able to have, as an adult, be able to exist as my little boy's dream, it feels wonderful. All in all, my relationship with pride has evolved. I still think we have a ways to go because I believe it was Marsha P. Johnson who said, like, there's no pride if someone's liberation is still, they don't have access to the liberation. So as long as we are still fighting, especially in this current day era of 2025, we have to still resist. So the parties can continue, but the protests have to continue too.
How has my relationship with pride changed over the years? I used to not attend or celebrate. I had some internalized homophobia being raised in a Christian household where my entire family was homophobic and they would make remarks and do all these things. So I spent most of my life in the closet, I would say, until I graduated from college. And when I moved away from my family is when I was like, okay, I can actually be myself without feeling like I'm being watched like a hawk, and judged and all these different things. But it's been more recent, like within the last 5 years, I've actually like started celebrating, still haven't been to a big like pride parade, but I do go to like the small miniature events, like the ones that they have in the park, the karaoke sessions, the vendors, those kinds of things. But it hasn't been until most recently, like within the last 5 years. So it's like, it's kind of a light bulb moment because I'm like, dang, you really didn't like allow yourself to experience all the joys or the celebration of who you are, like who I am. And it took a minute. And sometimes I still struggle with it because I'm like, okay, this is me. But I have to constantly talk to myself like, there's a part of me that always thinks about like how other people would feel when they experience me because they know the old version of me that wasn't really me to begin with. So it's also like, until the last 5 years, I've been heavily like mindset, like, no, I can't do that because I sing and I sing at church and I do all these things and I don't want to draw attention, until you get to a point where you just like, fuck it. This is me, take it or leave it.
I initially, before I came out, I would say I came out at 21 to a queer friend at the time, best friend at the time. And I was like, well, I've been bottling all this shit up. Like, I've been in church all my life. Like, I've been bottling a lot of stuff up. So I thought there was gonna be like communal conversations and nights like this where we're like talking about real shit. But then I was like, oh wait, unfortunately our community has also perpetuated a hypersexualization, stemming from slavery, colonization, queer phobia, that I can't connect to folks. And so I was really excited to genuinely show up, and then I got quickly disappointed and had quickly learned that my interaction with other queer people, specifically gay men, was through sex. And so my pride was more about sexual liberation. Being so sexually repressed and oppressed in the church, I was like, okay, like being free means like being outside. And then I started meeting more folks of trans experience that have then allowed me to express my gender expansively. And then I was like, wait, like we go beyond like all this physical, both sexually, but also how we show up. I'm like, oh wow, there's like deeper meaning here. And so pride used to mean solely sexual liberation, and now it's like I'm talking about like queer liberation, like a interruption, a questioning, a curiosity of how we're showing up in the world, and also using our ancestral wisdom to do that authentically.
First off, celebration is activism, right? Activism is celebration. I think when we think of activism, we think of the person in the streets with their fist up, with the picket sign. Yes, that's resistance, but it's one type of resistance. Resistance can take place in different mediums, whether protests, whether organizing mutual aid, whether teaching people, whether giving people resources, whether sharing your book list, or whether just liberating yourself. That's all resistance. Too many times we use the binary to think about resistance, when in actuality, we need to create and curate our own menu of resistance. Therefore, resistance and celebration is the same thing to me. But that's me and my nuanced view. I understand some of my siblings only think of pride at the celebration point. I would invite them to expand their minds when they're ready, especially because of current day and what's going on with the harm and violence to our trans siblings, with the harm and violence to many Black people across America. Expand your palette, create your own menu for your resistance, right? And it doesn't have to look like anybody else's. Your resistance doesn't have to look like Seven's resistance, right? It can have different flavors, it can be a different color, it can have different shapes and sizes, just like the beauty and the multidimensionality of our community. But the intentionality is key. If we're going to create a balance of celebration and resistance, or create and aspire for a type of celebration that is resistance, then we must be intentional, we must be strategic. I'll give you an example. When you are working 40 hours a week, when you are tired, and you go out to the club and you dance the night away, that's a point of resistance. Even though you're suffering through capitalism, even though you're suffering through most of these things, you are able to still punch all of that in the face and dance your heart away. That's resistance, because what the system will want you to do is lay down and die. So keep dancing, and then when you are able to, when you have the capacity to, go further and beyond, and start with something simple. I always say this, don't start with the 50-pound weight. Don't start with the 100-pound weight. Don't go in that gym and lift 200 pounds. Start with 5 pounds. Read Angela Davis, read some James Baldwin, get into some YouTube videos, start small, and you'll see your activism grow. You'll see your seed for resistance grow. And then before you know it, you might be an abolitionist. I don't know.
It's the most important. I had mentioned earlier that my mom had passed away in 2022 unexpectedly. And when that happened, I was like, well, the worst thing in my life has happened. So I'm like, well, I guess there's nothing stopping me now. And so I never came out to her. She was super religious. And so I came out on social media and I was like, hey mom, I'm gay. And that was so necessary for me, because I had to really come to a point where I realized the family in which I was born, there was still ways I was entertaining them and kind of enduring a homophobia. And I think people think homophobia is only violent action or words, but it's not talking about queerness when it's in the room, not talking about me and my queerness when it's in the room. It's also violent. And so I had gone in this kind of silence of, I can show up but with restriction for some time. And so when I started meeting my queer and trans friends, I was like, well, maybe this entire concept of family is fucked. Because if you think about it, like Western ideas of family is really rooted in property, right? Who's gonna attain something when someone passes away? Usually rooted with the man, the husband. And so I was like, wait, I guess I can rely on people who I've met later in life who know me as I am and is not dealing with this struggle to understand their conception of me and who I am now. So to be able to be in community with folks, and I see community also as a place of agency, right? Because the things that we learned about traditional family is that everything is through obligation, right? That's your cousin, that's your sibling, that's your parent, that's your child. Like, you have to do these, well, children, you should do things for. But like, everything is through obligation. And, you know, I thought about the culture of Thanksgiving, right? People talk about going to holidays, and we're talking about so much anxiety within us. And I'm like, why are we hanging out with people or fellowshipping people who make us feel unsafe? And so what's beautiful about community, why it's such a priority to me, is because I'm choosing to be with people. And if we get to a point where our connection is not the same, or we realize our values differ, we can also like sever. And and while people see that as like disappointing, I see that as liberating, because then you're only having people in your life who affirm and are able to add to your life versus enduring any kind of relationship.
My favorite memory or experience from Pride. I'll take you to last year, right? Last year, I told you all I'm from New York, New Jersey area also. I remember missing my flight going back home, right? I was supposed to come back to Atlanta after a weekend full of foolishness, right? And I missed my flight, and they weren't gonna have another flight till the next day, right? And so like, I can't sleep in the airport. I could stay in New York a day, but like, I wanna get home today. I wanna get home soon. So my buddy was like, just fly out of Philly tomorrow. I was like, fly out of Philly, but that's like 2 states away. That's a long drive. He said, it's Pride. Someone's gonna take you to Philly. And I was like, you know what? Somebody is. And this is like 12 o'clock in the middle of the day. I was supposed to have my flight that morning. I had me a cocktail. I was feeling right for my flight. Suddenly I didn't have a flight, and I had to return to Brooklyn to start the party again and find a way back home. When I tell you, when I explain what happened to just one person, strangers started offering me passageway to Philly. Like, when I tell y'all, like, folks paved the way for me to feel supported and getting me back home. It reminded me of how this wraparound support, where you need it, is always there when you have access to community. When you facilitate and connect to community, there is no lack when you're sharing and giving and receiving all those things. So all in all, I made it back home, y'all. But I ended up partying the whole way through and being with my people in fantastic ways, having deep and intentional conversations, and really, I wanna say, connecting with personhood in my time there. So I'm not thinking all the way to all my prides, but that pride right there stands out. And I'm sure when I think about it next year, this pride is gonna stand out to me too.
My most memorable Pride experience was actually here in Atlanta. I actually went to, what's that park? 10th and Piedmont? The park that's over there?
Oh, yeah, Piedmont Park.
Piedmont Park. And there were like so many vendors. It was like dancing happening, like everybody laying out on a picnic, got their dogs, and everybody running around having a good time. Got me a little drink from a little cooler and a little pouch. I had a great time. But people that I didn't expect to see there from Cincinnati, I was like, oh, hello. And it was kind of like oh, you see me, I see you, we see each other. But I ended up having a great time because I was around, I felt safe, I felt seen. I didn't feel like I had to put myself in a box. And that was actually 2 years ago. And so I still remember it like it was yesterday. Had a phenomenal time and wasn't ready for the night to end. Clearly we took the evening somewhere else to a club, and that was a whole other experience in itself that I'm just like, don't want to talk about. But that was my favorite memory, and gotta do it again sometime.
I believe there is a time for activism, and then there's a time for advocacy. I think that Pride is a great form of activism. You know, go down the streets. If you must be in nude, go off. You know, activism is very much so the burn it down, tear it up. You know, everything to me, I think it's the letting the emotions, letting the rage, letting the joy letting all of those things out versus advocacy is actually organizing and solving issues that exist within the community. I hope that the future of Pride, number one, we begin to expand it to include Black trans women and be able to actually center it. Because right now, I think that when we consider Pride as a celebration, as a movement, for some it is a moment where we're centering white male gaze. For other, it's just another time where they can drink color or drink cups that have rainbows on them. But in its truth, I think that it really should center the most marginalized of us, those Black trans women. And I hope that we begin to use that time to organize, push policies forward, even get our community together to have intentional conversations about what we can solve within our own community. I think it's very, very important that we don't tell people outside of the LGBTQ community about the problems that we have kind of going on the inside. I think it's important that we decide to solve it amongst ourselves. I also feel the same way about Black people. It'll be a cold day in hell before I go to a white person and tell them the problems that exist amongst the Black community. So I think in the same way, we need to use Pride as a time for organizing, a time for getting policies pushed forward, and a time to continue to celebrate. I'm here for the celebration, and I think that we honestly should expand it, because I think that it should include family. It should include spaces for allyship, beyond performative allyship and, deals and sales and all of the things. So hopefully the future of Pride looks much more intentional as opposed to another month that just happens.
My hope for the future of Pride and LGBTQIA plus liberation is more collaboration across all sectors. When we talk about intersectionality, there are a lot of things that intersect. There are a lot of people that intersect, a lot of experiences that intersect, and we don't touch on the intersectionality enough. It's always this and this, or this or that, and it's not just a collective this. And I think that's what hinders us from reaching true liberation, because we're so stuck on, well, this way is better than this, or, well, the way I do it is better than. It's a collaboration. It can look however it needs to look, trial and error, but just the ability to try and come together really makes all the difference, because it's more than one mind coming together to create something great. Not one person just had this idea and now it is what it is now. It took collaboration, research, studying, pulling in different people and perspectives. So I would like to see more collaboration.
My hope is that we never stop growing, not only in numbers, but in depth, in relation to ourselves and in relationships to other people. Now, I don't want to promote the idea that growth needs to happen at every moment, in every instant, but I'm so excited that we are continuing to undo the harm, the violence, the injustice that has been committed towards us in our community. I don't necessarily see it as just an undoing. I actually see it as a return to our liberation, because before European colonization, before Christian supremacy, we were queer and trans folks out in the community, and now it may have been called something else, or it may not even been seen as some kind of othering phenomena, but I see us actually as returning to what happened before them folks came over. Because we still have a history that is everlasting despite all the violence we experience. And so my hope is that we actually grow, but also never forget where we have come from. Not only the oppression, but also the joy that exists in our community.
I hope for so many things. You can see my mind moving, right? I think what I hope for is infinite grace for us and for our people. We are subject to so much pain, so much horror, so much trauma, so much violence, that I don't think we are aware of it sometimes. And it pours out of us in so many terrible ways. For the future of my community, for the future of our community, I would love some healing grace for us, some alleviance of the loads we've been carrying, some alleviance of the projection we've been carrying. I see so many of us maneuvering through our daily lives and we're not even ourselves. We don't know if we're hungry, we don't know if we're happy, we don't know if we're mad, we don't know if we're frustrated, because we're not in connection with our bodies. I think once we allow ourselves to experience a form of grace, and I'm not talking about the grace, y'all, that you just let someone do what they do. I'm talking about that graceful of accountability. We'll get to a space in which we're ready to grow together as a community, because we're gonna need everybody. And I don't wanna be doomsday, but like what's coming and what has to happen, we need everyone on board. And some folks aren't gonna make it. And I don't mean that in a pessimistic way, but like some folks who are too entrenched in their trauma ain't gonna make it. But folks who are able to apply some goodness of grace to themselves and to others, I am delighted for that vision. And as someone who loves thinking about the future, I believe it's possible. I believe it's possible to surmount that. I believe it's possible to gather, and I believe it's possible to persist.